Welcome, everybody, to Before the Commit, episode 19. This week, we're going to be covering Grok Heavy and Ralph Wiggum. Yeah, the character from The Simpsons who likes to repeat himself. Also, in News or Noise, we'll be talking about apparently Utah is one of the first states to be allowing prescriptions to be made online via agent. And also an interesting article by a former OpenAI security researcher about the concept that, AI is not just a fill-in-the-blank agent anymore. And in the Kill 'em Chain, we'll be talking about Echo Leak. Surprise, another prompt injection attack vector. With me, as usual, I have my friend Dustin Hillgartner. Hey, Dustin, how's it going?
Hello.
Yeah, so, well, before we get into that, interesting news today out of Tailwind Labs. I know you saw this article. So if you're not familiar, Tailwinds writes a CSS library, Cascading Style Sheets library, one of a slew of frameworks that have existed, whether it be like jQuery or Angular or React. And like one of the ways that these companies monetize themselves, their open source projects, is they sell premium add-ons. For example, like a nice dashboard that you can just import, or, templates that you can utilize, and other premium type services. React has, a whole marketplace that has been created of like premium templates. Anyway, there was a pull request made to make the library a little bit more usable by LLMs. So essentially, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. Essentially, if an LLM is writing your code, if you have an autonomous pipeline, do you really care which library is being used? Does it really matter? Do you care about the packaging framework that you use? You are concerned with the end result. And so by virtue of this, they have this marketplace that they have has been sort of cannibalized. And it's really just, I think something, maybe I haven't coined the term, but something called AI vampire economics. Essentially, AI is creating, vampiric type, I think, Stack Overflow is a good example. I mean, it might not be the same thing because Stack Overflow is in a licensing agreement, but that may dissipate over time because there may not be new content getting into Stack Overflow. Reddit also has a licensing agreement with a bunch of web crawlers. I think there are tons of markets. I wrote an article today on LinkedIn about all the places where this is penetrating. Pluralsight is another example. Sites that teach you how to code, like with video, code camps, Udemy, like all these things are just kind of like business models that are getting sucked dry, as you could say, by AI. What do you think? What's your thoughts about this?
Well, when I looked at this particular thing, and I was aware of this already with Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow their traffic has decreased quite a bit, and the amount of new questions that are being asked on Stack Overflow has also drastically decreased. Now, Stack Overflow has a great volume of data that's probably very useful, so I imagine they'll probably try to turn into, kind of what Reddit did, which is start income streams that have to do with selling the data.
Yeah, they already have that. They already do this. Yeah.
Tailwind, on the other hand, has it's like a framework to help you develop. And, it was pretty widely used before AI. But then after AI, it really kind of exploded in usage. You can imagine there's probably a lot of people out there creating, whether on the no code or even on the engineering side, creating kind of little bespoke web apps and things like that, trying out the AI, and also, like we're talking about, vertical integration, going up and down the stack and building their own things. So the usage of this tool has exploded, but the problem is, and this is probably going to be a problem for much more companies than just Tailwind. I think that these are the kind of early fallers or the early indications, but I think you're probably going to see this across the board. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like both the idea that LLMs are taking people away from your website. So the way Tailwind made money was they had an open source product, but they depended on people coming to their website to read the docs and understand how to use it. And then when people came to the website, they would attempt to upsell them to other types of services or products. Mm-hmm. And humans, being the probabilistic beings they are, we would on a percentage basis go and buy that stuff.
Right.
And now they've seen the amount of traffic that comes to look for docs drop by huge percentages.
Right.
And therefore, the probabilistic aspect of someone buying their product has dropped by huge percentages. And that's a problem because their product is open source and they might not be able to afford to support it anymore. I think they laid off like 75% of their workforce, or maybe the number's wrong.
Yep. No, that's right.
Portion of their workforce. I think you're going to see this across the board. It's not just that AI is going to take traffic away from typical places that traffic has been, but also vertical integration. It might not be that everybody who stopped buying just because they didn't end up on the docs page. They might have stopped buying because maybe they're building those types of services or tools internal now. The whole build versus buy equation has changed. But I think in this case, the way it's being reported is that it mostly has to do with traffic. And I imagine that Tailwind probably has spent more time looking into this than I have. So I'll take them at their word that it's just, they've lost a lot of traffic.
And so you kind of lead into where I wanted to go next, which is like the concept of, outsourcing, parts of your business, whether it be CRM or tickets, mm-hmm. or program management. You as a small business or a large business choose opportunity costs, right? Where the cost of building something internally versus buying it and then focusing on maybe what is your core business. Those sorts of opportunity decision costs the economics of them are way different than they were 6 months ago and will be way different 6 months from now. And, the whole like post.com like era, like was built on these companies that were like taking advantage of like web 2.0 and like moving applications from the desktop to the web. And like what we have started doing is asking ourselves, well, why are we paying for this service when we could have a much better vertically integrated experience? That's, mm-hmm. We have, what do we actually use in our CRM system? What do we actually use in our ticketing system? Why not just build a system? And oftentimes you're trying to figure out how to get that data together so you can make better informed decisions. You wind up having that. So my point is like, the whole industry of software as a service is being disrupted like literally every day.
Yeah. I mean, particularly if you're a startup, right? A lot of times you're trying to keep your burn down. But there's certain tools as a software company startup that you're going to need to buy, in sort of the before AI world. Like you're going to buy your ticket system. You're going to buy your help desk tickets or whatever else you need. Because building that yourself would represent maybe weeks or months of time on the development for at least one engineer. And you could better use that somewhere else. I mean, the bread and butter of a software company is you focus your engineers on the thing that represents your IP, and you mm-hmm. buy pretty much everything else. And the idea behind it also is that you're focusing on your IP, and if you buy something, then that company is focusing on that aspect of your architecture, so that you kind of have you're leveraging other people from outside to make your product better. Now, the downside to that is A, you're paying money for things that you hypothetically could build yourself, and B, you're often spending more for it than you would if you just got the features that you wanted, because baked into the idea of building a SaaS product or a platform is you often are building many features to try to increase your market share across all the different feedback you're getting about, oh, I would use it if you had just had this feature or that feature. All those things have costs and development costs. You have to spread that across your user base. You know, I know everyone would like to believe that it's spread all over evenly, that you're paying for exactly the features you get. But the reality is that with pricing models, sometimes you're paying for features you don't get. So with that being said, now what has changed with the advent of these coding tools like Claude Code and others is now, instead of it taking, you know, weeks or months to build something that you would buy, maybe with the limited amount of use cases that you have for that product, like a ticket system, maybe you only need this feature, this feature, this feature. It's much easier to potentially just build it over the course of a couple of days, and then add features to it as you encounter features that you need.
You have control over the roadmap, right? If you don't like the way something is set up, you're not beholden to that SaaS company to wait in line. You don't pay enough money, whatever. You're basically building whatever you need. And if something doesn't work for you, you change it. You don't wait, you deploy it to production, and, you have it in your hands.
You can kind of see what the mode is through that lens, because what are you looking to reproduce? You're probably looking to reproduce things that are very UI heavy, but behind the scenes they're pretty straightforward. Like, think about what, not to call out names or anything, but I think that there's companies that may have a little bit trouble in the future, or have to come up with inventive ways of changing their business plan. Like companies like Trello, which are kind of in the middle of like the ticket space, where they're trying to take the low end of the ticket space and be the cheap kind of startup ticket system. They're not like as big as like Jira or something else out there. They're also competing with like GitHub and things like that, which have like, free services that come through the fact that you're probably using them as your code repository or whatnot. But a company like Trello, if you think about what they are behind the scenes in the database, it's a relatively simple schema. It's just tickets and stat and labels and, statuses and things like that. And I apologize. I'm sure they probably have a bunch of features that they built and try to upsell to that I've never used. But in the entry level, it's very simple. Like, it would take you, a seasoned software engineer who's very experienced with Claude Code could probably build that overnight if they burn the midnight oil. You could even Wiggum it, as we'll talk about later.
Yeah, let's just jump right into it. Like, so like in this like world where I feel like every time I sit down, like I actually stopped using an IDE. I just use the terminal with Claude Code. I'm like coding on my tablet. I'm coding on my phone. I'm talking to Claude. I built an entire system called Ponder, which is going to be available for sale soon as it was a fun little side project that I use every day for organizing my thoughts and my ideas. And it's integrated with MCP and all that kind of stuff. Like, the idea that you can build an entire stack, a vertically integrated stack for your business, for your startup, and you don't need to, you just need to buy tokens. Right? So, what are, so you get into you get into like the cockpit of like a machine, and you feel like you're orchestrating this. Like, it's very, very satisfying to be doing this type of work now. It's like, there aren't enough hours in the day to be doing. Like, I'm running like, 7 or 8 different hobby projects right now. I have a couple different work projects going on in parallel that I'm context switching, teleporting between windows and stuff like that. And I haven't started using Ralph Wiggum, so I'm really curious to hear why you're using it, what problems it solves, and how is it helping you to accelerate your efforts, or maybe accelerate is not the right word, but to drive things to completion.
Well, I do think that it is an acceleration of some sort, but it also comes with a learning curve. So it's kind of like I guess you would call it like a J curve or something like that. There's a learning experience to it. But essentially what it is it's, it's not like this new big application or anything like that. It's just it's technically a technique. And really what it is you're wrapping. So Claude Code can also be run, it can be run through the CLI. You don't have to even launch it. You can just run it. You could pipe something to it in Bash or something like that.
Interesting.
So it doesn't have to ever really be opened. You can just have it run.
So what's an example of something you would pipe to it? I haven't worked that way with it.
I mean, you could pipe hello to it and it'll go hello. It'll spin up Claude Code and do a very expensive hello back.
Or you could say like, analyze this directory and tell me what's in it. Yeah, gotcha.
You could go, hey, fix. You could pipe, hey, go into GitHub, check out this pull request and fix it.
I understand.
And it'll go do that in a headless mode. I guess that's what you would call it.
Yeah.
But it also is an SDK. You can use it via Python and call it within your Python code. So they've really made Claude Code completely accessible from all directions. You can open it up in VS Code. You can open it up on the web. You can open it up in the CLI and have like a cool textual interface. And then you could just forego that entirely and run bash scripts that pipe things to it. You could run it in pipelines in your CI/CD. You can run it in your Python applications as, an SDK coming in as a dependency. In fact, that's what this new AI or this new agent SDK is through Claude Code, which I probably should look at and talk about in the next episode. But anyway, to go back to Ralph Wiggum technique, it essentially is like this one-liner of bash script. That's the advent of it. And it's just a bash loop around the Claude call. So you can imagine if you were in the CLI, what this bash loop is doing is just when you ask it to do something, when Claude's done, it just pastes the same exact prompt in again and asks it to do it again. Now you might say, well, what's the point of that? Well, if your prompt is tell me what this variable does, and you put it in a Ralph Wiggum loop, it's not going to do much at all. It's just going to tell you what the variable does over and over and over again. But if you construct a prompt that is in itself takes into account the cyclical nature that you're going to call it over and over again. So let's say your prompt is, take this list of, let's say you built a plan and you said, make this into a checklist of phases.
When you say plan, do you mean put Claude into plan mode, like Shift Tab?
Well, I don't want to say not that, but particularly what I'm talking about is, let's say you made a plan in an MD file, like a markdown file.
I see. Okay.
So you have like a PRD.
Like a PRD.
Yeah, a PRD and a markdown file.
Okay.
And then you said, break this down into a checklist of tasks, and it makes like a checklist of tasks in a markdown file. You can construct a prompt that says, go down this list of items and finish them. And as you do, check them off. Now you can call that prompt over and over and over and over again, and it will continue going through the checklist until they're all done.
Why is a single pass through not sufficient? What's the purpose of the loop?
Well, what you'll notice in Claude Code is that there's a limit to how much it'll do in one prompt, right? If I say, hey, get me 3 examples of this, it'll come back in one prompt with 3 examples. If I say 5 examples, it'll come back with 5 examples. There is a number that you will get to. Depending on the complexity, it might be 2 if what you're asking for is very complex. Depending on the complexity of each item in the list, it'll eventually exhaust itself, whatever that means, and it will come back to you and just give you a status update and say, hey, I finished the first 3 items on your list. What do you want me to do now? I could continue on if you want me to, or I could stop, or I could go make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I mean, who knows? But you would then have to come in and sit down at your IDE and say, keep on going and press enter, and then walk away and go watch television again and come back 5 minutes later when it dings to probably say, continue going on. Thank you for telling me there's 3 more done. Now with a Wiggum loop, or Ralph Wiggum loop, or whatever you want to call it, it will go through until it's finished.
Yeah, isn't this like essentially because an LLM has what's called limited attention? Like it's not able to run for long periods of time because it will consider a task complete. It gets distracted very easily.
I don't think that it thinks the task is complete, because often it will come back to you and say, okay, I finished the first 3 items. Do you want me to continue? So it knows that it didn't finish.
I see.
It's just not able to keep on going for some
without
reason.
human intervention.
Without human intervention.
I see.
And thankfully, the bash script just adds that human intervention again. Now, of course, the bash script doesn't know what you want to say next. So the best possible thing you can do is just repeat yourself over and over and make sure that the first thing you said was something that will complete the task if you repeated it over and over. So that's basically the crux of it.
Why isn't this core functionality to Claude Code? Like, why hasn't this been like, I want to put Claude into like Ralph Wiggum mode? Like, why is it an add-on? Why is it
Claude Code has plugins, so you can add the Ralph Wiggum plugin, and then it'll be available through the slash commands, slash Ralph dash loop or whatever they call it at the moment. I built a skill that wraps around it because I wanted to not have to take care of writing that, status list of items checklist. I wanted to make it more end to end. So I wrote a skill that's wrapped around Ralph Wiggum that I can point it at literally anything, and it will break it down into tasks and kick off Ralph on it.
I see.
So I could point it at like a handful of tickets or a whole milestone, or, I could just write it a block of text by talking, and it will break that down into steps. I could point it at a PRD, pretty much anything. Now there's some inner details, like there's a setting for max iterations, because the way it knows to stop is that your prompt says, put this keyword when you're finally done with all of them. And then it regexes that keyword out and kills the loop.
I see.
But you need to have max iterations on it, because as we know with LLMs, they're probabilistic. So they won't always respond with the keyword you want. Now, granted, every loop that goes by, it gets another opportunity to give you the keyword. So it typically always will work. Even if it doesn't finish on the exact loop it's done with, it'll finish on the next one, because it'll pop up and open up the next one, look at the checklist, see they're all checked off, and say it's done, and then hopefully remember to do the keyword at that point again. But nonetheless, you have the max iterations to stop it if you want.
Yeah, what's token consumption like under what if you had like a crazy list? Is there a way to like take cost in consideration as an ejection point? Or
to answer that question just quite literally, it is exactly the same amount of tokens as you doing it yourself, because the outer loop is just bash, so it's not consuming any tokens. It's just repeating your prompt over and over and over again. Now, it's probably slightly less tokens for you to say continue on a list it's already working on, rather than tell it to go look through the list again and start,
I guess what I'm saying is like, could you wind up in a loop that you didn't, because of the probabilistic nature? Like, again, I haven't used it, so I'm asking questions based off of like what you're saying. But like from a security perspective, like, could you wind up in a loop that, say you let it run overnight and it just kept looping over and over again and never got to the end, and you wake up and realize it had been running for like several hours?
Yeah. Absolutely. That's why you got to use max iterations on your bash script.
I see.
That's deterministic. That's deterministic. It's not going to.
Yeah.
The bash script is deterministic, so it'll kill after a certain amount of iterations, no matter what that you specify. It's not.
What's the number that you go with right now?
Depends on the size of what I'm doing. Let's just say that I've been annoyed by coming back and my max iterations is done, but the project I gave it wasn't done. So I usually try to pick a number that's higher.
Like 20,
like
100?
obviously higher. Like I would say if it's a medium-sized project, I would do 20 or 30.
I see.
If it's something small, and when I say small, I mean small enough to still be in a Ralph Wiggum loop. If it's really small, then you don't use the Ralph at all. So I'm saying if it's like a small milestone, then I would use 10. If it's a medium milestone, then I would use 20 or 30. And I've heard of people running with unlimited and just waking up the next morning to see where it is.
Nice.
But they were doing like academic things like building a whole programming language or something like that.
Yeah. Or they work for Anthropic and have unlimited tokens.
Yeah, that's the life.
Yeah. Let me get one of those gift cards.
Yeah.
So
the new
I'm curious,
Amazon gift card.
Yeah. Oh, you gave me $100 token for Anthropic.
Yeah, here, Grandma, here's 100 tokens.
So I'm curious how this all plays with what we talked about last week. So you have the hooks and the commands and all these other sort of the agents. Like how does this all work with all of that?
Well, I mean, it all works with all that because commands, skills, hooks, etc. They're all just part of your Claude Code project, or if you have them at an upper level, they're part of all your Claude Code projects. And the brilliance of having all those files in your project is they're available anywhere your project is. So in your pipelines, etc. So yeah, this is
Can you run a Ralph Wiggum loop? Like it's a bash script, but let's say you have a GitHub pipeline that's doing ticket processing or running security, post commit security checks or whatever have you, running end-to-end testing. Can you apply those same, this to that as well?
Yeah. I mean, a good example of where a Ralph Wiggum loop might make sense is when you have automatic code reviews and cyclical fixes that that happen automatically. What you'll find sometimes is that the code review will come back with so many items to fix that the agent that then goes to fix those items will do what I was talking about before. It'll fix the first 3 and come back with a status update when really you wanted it to fix all the items. So a Ralph Wiggum loop would probably make sense in that pipeline.
Mm-hmm. Loop. Pivoting now to something.
One last thing I'll say about Ralph Wiggum is it's not specific to Claude Code, even though they're the ones that initially brought it to people's attention. So if you're using other types of coding agents out there, you'll probably find a lot of articles about how to do the Ralph Wiggum technique with those things as well. So it's worth pointing out.
Yeah. And just on a related note, like I've been reading more and more about people using Claude Code for things other than code because of the nature of how powerful the skill tooling works. How, it's amazing what you can do with grep and a context window. Treating you wrote an article today about, like using SaaS websites, SaaS is like, 99% a database, 1% front end. I saw another article that you commented on regarding, that, the file system is the new database. And like the ability for, like, it's just, I was thinking about this the other day, like what we were doing a year ago, like copying and pasting code back and forth between ChatGPT and our IDEs and like trying to like make it aware of context and like having it keep up with context. And like now Claude doesn't need to do that. Like what it does is it figures out what context is relevant to whatever you're working on and then kind of uses that as its mechanism to like, the tool calling, like maybe 20, 30 tool calls before it goes and executes an operation, along with like whatever other context is available, like markdown files, so on and so forth. So yeah, like the idea behind using a Ralph Wiggum loop for things other than writing code are probably like, for example, writing documentation. oftentimes when you're using it to write documentation, it will give up after a certain period of time, when really what you wanted to do is just like go through these like 100 markdown files, 100 HTML files, and make every single change, and don't stop till you're done.
Yeah, exactly.
Really useful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you tool it in, you can make those calls easy. Like, you know, some people out there will be like, oh, I got to construct a prompt that's reusable over and over. Well, no, you can wrap it in a skill that makes the prompt for you based on what you give it. So yeah, I mean, I happen to believe that maybe the Wiggum loop is more useful outside of engineering than it is in engineering, because in software engineering, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's very, I don't want to say it's not useful in software engineering, but there is a learning curve to it, right? Like if you have it build a whole application from end to end, like a PRD that's like 20, 30, 40 pages long, you're obviously going to have a whole boatload of problems at the end that you're going to have to go through and fix. Whereas if you had broken into phases and walked the IDE through the milestones, then maybe you would have fixed a lot of those bugs along the way. So there's some learning curve to it, and probably some new types of tools on the tail end. There's probably maybe some additional prompts you need to do about how to write tests and things like that properly. So I haven't quite, go ahead.
Does it solve the Terraform problem with like the eventual consistency and like the fact that a plan doesn't actually tell you? It only kind of guesses what it will look like.
I don't think that it solves the Terraform problem per se. The Terraform problem, I mean, if you're talking about like the general Terraform problem that's existed for a long time, like before AI, then I don't think it, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe you have an idea that I don't, but
well, I would say that the Terraform problem with AWS specifically is that when you run a plan and when it actually gets applied, those two things don't always agree. You can have failures because of the way that infrastructure on the AWS side interacts with each other. You have failures that are not necessarily going to be AWS is not, Terraform is honestly declarative, but not deterministic. It is somewhat there's a level of probabilism that what you do will actually happen. There's no way to simulate.
Rely on AWS, and AWS is
it's eventual probable consistency. The idea so what AI introduces is that AI doesn't know necessarily that whatever you told it to do isn't going to happen because it itself is improbable. So the idea behind a Ralph Wiggum loop would be that like you can have it maybe check to see if what you told it to do actually happened. And perhaps it solves the problem of what happens when you have AI or an agent go and build some Terraform.
Oh, I see what you're saying. For you. Like a Ralph Wiggum Terraform apply, you know? Like every engineer who's had Terraform has done this before. They do the apply, it gets partially through the apply, it fails, and then you got to do a fix and do apply again. Like a Ralph Wiggum loop could probably work there. Yes. And you just say once the Ralph Wiggum loop is over, when the apply goes through fully, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. So I agree. That would, I wouldn't say solve the problem, but it would certainly make your life easier if you're the one doing it.
Yeah, it's a problem that Terraform cannot solve in its current form because there's no way to simulate something happening unless you build a simulation environment. Like that's not a Terraform problem. That is just the nature of whatever the underlying provider is, right? So you could Terraform Cloudflare, you could Terraform Okta, whatever have you. They all behave differently, and the provider is just the interface. So like you would need simulation environments for all of them. So it's really a band-aid for just the way Terraform works.
Yeah. Now, outside of engineering, outside of Terraform and all that, I think that the Ralph Wiggum loop is very useful as well. Like a good example is like if you're in like another field like sales or something like that, and you're using Claude Code because you're an early adopter and you've heard all this stuff about it, and you're using it to like go through your social media and respond to all your posts, or go look for leads through, some sort of workflow you have for finding leads, and you tell it to go find you 10 leads, you probably have run into this issue before where it comes back with 3 or 4, because it exhausted itself. And if you were to wrap a Wiggum loop around that, you could say, get me 1,000, and then run it for unlimited loops, or run it for some, ceiling that's higher than what it would need in terms of max iterations, and then go to sleep and wake up in the morning and you got 1,000 emails in there. Or it's replied to all your posts that you need it to. Nice. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you use AI to reply to all your posts unless you know how to dial it into your identity.
Yeah, I've gotten a bunch of really weird responses recently. But albeit I've gotten some humans that have been not so kind either. Like a lot of aggro replies. I just saw one earlier. I'm just like,
those are the best replies.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that get you engagement. I'm like, come on, someone else fight with him.
Yeah, I don't
How do
even
you know they're not me trying to make engagement?
Yeah, maybe it could be you. So anyway, let's pivot into something else. So we got kind of a bonus episode this week. We got 2 tools of the week. And it's really around I don't know how it works. Maybe it's a council of some kind. Mm-hmm. But recently, I know I was doing some research and I was like, what is this Grok heavy thing? It's $300 a month. It's got to be amazing. Like, let me try it out. And Grok is really good at research, right? It's sort of like what I use for research. It's not great at coding. It's not great at images. I do like Grok Imagine for animating images. And
now, what's interesting is just to preface that real quick. Like, what's interesting though is that Grok Heavy Grok Code is actually one of the most widely used models. If you look at the stats behind, like, is it Open Router or something like that for coding? I can't remember which stat it was. And also it scores very, very high in coding. So there's probably folks out there who are like, what are you talking about? Grok doesn't code well. I use it to code.
Okay.
That's not what we're saying, is that Grok isn't good at coding. In fact, Grok is very good at coding. In fact, I think there are arguably models that are better at coding than Claude. But you have to remember that Claude Code is not just Claude.
Right.
Claude Code is an orchestration engine, that we've shortened to call an agent, right?
Yeah.
It's an agent around Claude. So the equivalent would be, if Claude is the brain, it's like saying, is your brain good at coding? Yeah, it's really good at coming up with great ideas. But are you able to execute on it? Like, maybe this isn't the greatest example, but
it's not the model itself. It's the way that you interact with the model.
It's the orchestration of the tool calls, right? Because the model itself, like, if you give all the context of your code to Grok, it's going to do a great job of coding. The problem is that your code base is probably too big for Grok to see all at once. So then you get into the realm of where an agent and context engineering comes in. Right. And the reason why Claude Code and Claude together are the best at coding is because Claude is very good at coding. It may not be the best, but it's very good at coding. And Claude Code is the world's best context engineering platform that exists today.
Right.
It's able to go through large code bases and make sure that the right context is available to Claude when it needs it. Right. Because the reason why Grok, I say, isn't good at coding is not that the model itself isn't good at coding. In fact, it's great. It may even be arguably better than Claude on the stat side in some things versus others. But nobody has built an orchestration engine around it. No one has built Claude Code around Grok. And it's the same reason why ChatGPT is not in the running because Codex isn't as good as Claude Code. Cursor isn't as good as Claude Code. Windsurf isn't as good as Claude Code. None of them are as good as Claude Code right now. And what that is not Claude. It's not Opus that's doing all of that. It's the tool calling. Now, has the Opus team probably built Opus with Claude Code in mind, and Claude Code has built Claude Code with Opus in mind? Sure. And that means a lot too. Vertical integration, just put in that little quip there again. But it's more than just Claude Opus being great at coding. It's the orchestration of tools and context engineering around it that Claude Code is doing.
All right, cool. So
I brought you way off topic. We're going back to Grok Heavy real quick.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I should have said that. Like, I don't use Grok Code because Claude Code is a superior tool.
Yeah,
and I'm sure we should talk about like using Grok coding at some point. Or perhaps maybe somebody is working on something and making a competitor to Claude Code, because there's room for competition. So without getting distracted, let's get into Grok Heavy. So what's your, I used it for research, but I'm curious, what did you use it for? What's your feelings about it?
Well, my feelings is that it may be more powerful than I need. Because if you look at the data behind Grok Heavy, based on the complexity of what you ask it, it will spin up anywhere from 4 to 32 agents, meaning 4 to 32 instances of Grok that's going to go and try to figure out your problem. Now, these agents act both as like breadth, like they may divvy up the work a little bit, like I'm going to go look in that area and you go look in that area, but they also overlap with each other and do kind of like an LLM council a little bit, where they will second guess each other and look at the strengths and weaknesses of each other's arguments, challenge assumptions and spot errors and build on partial insights. And now the reason why I say it might be a little bit more powerful than I need is in my day-to-day, when I'm talking about things that we're doing within engineering, and I ask it, complex questions about things we're working on in the engineering space, it will only spin up maybe 4 or 5 agents or something like that to work on my problem. But like I said, it can spin up as many as 32 agents if it thinks it needs it. Now, what that means is that I may not be the demographic user for this product. Probably you're going to be some mathematician with some sort of really hard problem. You know what I mean? One that a mathematician would spend the rest of his life or decades of his life working on. Then that sucker is probably going to spin up 32. And then you're going to get your money's worth, right? For me, I feel like I get better answers than I do out of Grok alone, but it's not 4 times better with 4 agents. It's just 20% better, let's say.
Right.
Now, is that worth the extra cost? Probably not for me. But if I were working on like black hole math, and quantum physics and stuff like that, then it's probably makes a lot of sense to get. Now, what I can tell you is Grok is very, very good at science and math. So I think that's what they're aiming for.
Yeah, I've used it. I use this for threat modeling. And also like, avoiding cat and mouse security games, like building out, protocols and, applying, zero trust theory to a problem set and having it come out with a, strong argument about why something could probably fail and not work, so that you don't unnecessarily spend time on an idea, like try to kill my idea off. And then at the end, tell me if it's still worth pursuing. And so I used it for that specific project, and then, turned it off and realized expert would probably have given me similar results.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not have, like you said, taken it that last extra mile, and wonder if I could just use like an LLM counsel to achieve the same result. Because it's like maybe it's not really a scientific problem to solve.
I think unless it's like a problem that is something you would spend a career trying to solve, then I think you're probably going to be able to reproduce what Grok Heavy does with an LLM counsel that you build yourself. Now, what I haven't tried is trying to see if I can load up the context, right? Like, can I just drop in 2 million, because it has 2 million contexts. Can I drop in 2 millions of contexts and then ask it something deep? Like, one of the reasons why I haven't really been able to push Grok 4 Heavy to the limit is because I can't hook it into my world, right? Like, I can't get it into my IDE and have it look at my whole code base like I can with Claude. So what it does is it takes a seemingly cheaper model, like Claude Sonnet, let's say, can do a much better job of figuring out my code than Grok can, because it's got the Claude
Tool
code
calls.
and the context, the
Yeah.
tool calls.
You don't need to get the whole context inside of, you don't need to get the whole code base inside your context. You just get what you need and then put it in context. What you're saying is like, well, if I don't have token limitation, assuming I don't have, 2,000 characters of code, I should be able to throw the whole thing and it should be able to chew on it.
My belief is that if you could fit your entire code base into Grok Heavy, then you would get great results, because like I said, Grok is great at coding. It's just not, it doesn't have the Iron Man suit around it that Claude does with Claude Code.
It's not fast.
Actually, Grok Code Fast is
no. I mean, Grok Heavy is not fast.
I remember I loaded up when I was evaluating Grok Code Fast. I had to use Cursor because it's not in Claude Code, obviously. Right. And I used Grok Code Fast and Cursor, and man, that thing is so fast you can't even watch this. You can't even keep up with the stream of thought. It's just like flying past the page.
Grok Heavy could sometimes run for 15 minutes before you get an answer by the nature of doing.
Yeah, Grok Heavy is slow, but it's supposed to be for very, very large problems that take a while. Grok Code Fast is insanely fast. It almost feels cheap because of how fast it is, but it's really good at coding. But like I said, Claude Code is going to give you the best results at the moment because of all the tool calling and everything.
Cool. So let's move on to the rest of News or Noise.
Do you want to talk about Claude Code 2.1 at all?
Why don't we save that for next episode and also talk about Claude SDK?
Okay.
Yeah.
The Agent SDK. I'll do that.
Yeah. So it was reported today all over the place. I don't want to quote a particular news outlet, that Utah is the first U.S. state to allow artificial intelligence to prescribe medications. It's not for everything. It's a pilot program for one startup, and it's really around people that have chronic illnesses. So yeah, I mean, obviously it raises concerns about safety, and of course we know the dangers of prompt injection attacks. You can coerce a model to do something if the right guardrails are not in place.
Who runs it? I'm interested to understand who owns it, because
it's a pilot program for a health startup called Doctronic that allows an AI system to handle routine prescription renewals for patients with chronic conditions. The initiative, which kicked off quietly last month, is a high-stakes test of whether AI can safely take on one of healthcare's most sensitive tasks and how far that could spread beyond one AI-friendly state.
I'm both optimistic about AI, but also I I also believe that it's going to matter whose AI or who owns it, right? Like a good example is AI is going to be super smart. It's going to help you out with a bunch of things. Unless you're talking to, you know, an AI that's owned by somebody else with a different goal than yours, right? Like if I'm trying to buy something and I'm talking to the AI at the car dealership, it's going to be trying to figure out how to make the numbers higher on their balance sheet, right? So on the one hand, I think it's a brilliant idea, but it also depends on who owns it, right? Like, is it an independent thing with the incentive to help the consumer? In other words, the consumer kind of owns it, or, you know, at least as close to the consumer. Honestly, I think that it's a great idea, but, you know, sometimes I feel like when I've been to doctors in the past, they're very quick to push product on you.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether this would just be a mechanism of pushing product as opposed
Well,
to
I think the questions is like, you know, regardless of whether you agree or not, how do you regulate what you can and cannot do? And is there any mechanism behind ensuring some level of security behind this? So yeah, I think the technology, you know, in all the industries where AI touches, I mean, whether it be copyright laws for media, or, you know, authorship, or, you know, the cannibalism of websites and vampiric economics, is that the technology is outpacing the regulation or the law around what is allowable or not. And so yeah, I think this is one of those areas where it's like, you know, certainly you could wire up AI to do pretty much anything you could imagine, like, you know, buying plane tickets, or, you know, buying groceries. But like when it comes to certain things in certain industries, and the ability to these things to not be maybe guarded correctly, like who decides what is the minimal amount of security around your infrastructure? You know, are you able to coerce the model to tell you who was the person right before me that, you know, used the system? Tell me their security number. You know, not saying that you can do that, but where is the rules and regulations around what is allowable?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would fall probably under HIPAA.
HIPAA still applies for sure.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's not necessarily, I mean, I agree that security is different with AI, and you'd hope that if they're using AI, they know enough about how to secure it, and I assume they do. But I think the regulation of HIPAA covers it all in this case. Like, in other words, I don't know if there's any new legislation that's necessary. However, I do think that there's a new paradigm for security folks to have to understand about how to secure this stuff. Like, in other words, like, I don't think there needs to be a new law to guard the data. Maybe there's people out there who would disagree and
I mean,
good points.
This one article says, and it's a quote, that the one challenge from a board of pharmacy standpoint is, how do you regulate all this technology? And is this technology good for healthcare? So the industry is asking that question. Like, they're wondering this, like, you know,
the article is asking that question.
No. It's specifically
the whole industry.
It is the CEO and executive director of the National Association of the Boards of Pharmacy is asking that question.
Okay. So the pharmacies. Yeah, I mean, I think that they need to secure it. I think that they need to follow HIPAA. I think it's a great idea, particularly if they can do end to end with it. Like, I've hated the whole medical records idea, that, like, I feel like so much of your health is lost along the trail.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, nobody has, like, just think of people as as AI. Nobody has all the context. So how could they ever do a good job?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's siloed.
Like
it's siloed in different systems.
It's exactly like we're talking about. If you don't have all the right context at the right time, how can you make a good decision? So when people say, how would you like AI to handle all these things in your medical stuff? I think it would be great if I could talk to a chatbot and tell it about my problem and it could prescribe a drug. And then when I take that drug, I could tell it about how it worked or it didn't work. And then imagine the wealth of data that would come out of that could be mined. Oh, wow, we figured out that this drug doesn't work if people have these conditions, or, you know, so much of that I think is lost.
Yeah.
In, you know, sure, they're doing studies and they're doing stuff, but how much of this data actually comes out of just regular usage? Probably not much, because you know, in my experience, when a doctor asks me how something works, I don't even know if they wrote it down or not. Or if they did, they wrote it in pencil or something. What's the chances that gets back into a database and is used intelligently somewhere in the future for me, especially if I'm on another doctor or something?
Yeah. I'm not arguing against it. I think that there's a lot of value like that AI can bring to healthcare. And I do agree that, you know, human beings don't necessarily have a ledger, and, you know, maybe blockchain also plays a role in it, is that you have a ledger of your medical history, because it is siloed in these different data systems. And the older you get, you might have more doctors and more, you know, the left hand is not talking to the right. So I do think that there are ways to, you know, tear down silos, if you will.
It's absurd.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
it's so important to guard the privacy of our health data that we've guarded it from our doctors to some extent.
Yeah.
We've siloed it from the people who need it. So yeah, I think I'm hoping for that needle to be threaded better in the future. But yeah, on the security side, it's going to be a minefield, you know?
So reading this article today from Stephen Adler, actually subscribed to his Substack today. He's a former OpenAI safety researcher. He was there for 4 years, and now he's writing publicly about AI's future. Anyway, he wrote an article 4 years ago, was published in the New York Times, and he basically was describing what LLMs are as guess the next word, right? Which is like, you know, fundamentally like it's a, you know, a guess the word, next word. Like at its root, it's trying to figure out the probable nature of what the next word is. And there are ways to convince it, you know, based off of using other tools like RAG. You can do web search now. You can augment it with MCP. And what he's saying is that, you know, LLMs are no longer just guess the next word because of tool calling. Essentially, that's what the article says. And I think a good example is Claude Code, is that the nature of how the things determine what the next word is has been augmented by a whole slew, a whole ecosystem, we'll just call it that, of information that is external. We'll just say that for lack of a better word, because of the tool calling, because of live web search, because of MCP and other RAG, you know, and maybe, you know, tool calling is a form of RAG, right? Or like Claude.md is a form of RAG, right? That these things are now, from his perspective, a lot more dangerous than they ever have been. And like danger, you know, he's a privacy researcher, but like, and not dangerous like that we shouldn't use it, but like the caution around how we use these tools and how we kind of guard against what could go wrong as a result of, you know, using treating these LLMs as not just fill in the neck. They're not Mad Libs tools anymore. You know, like you ever played Mad Libs when you were younger? Maybe you still play Mad Libs. I don't know what you guys.
Every day.
By the way, what I think LLMs are probably really bad at Mad Libs because it's too logical. Unless you
Probably because of, I think LLMs are probably bad at Mad Libs because of the reinforcement learning that collapses their entropy.
Yeah, you would need a really good prompt to tell it to not do what it was trained to do.
Oh, it's asking for a verb again. Oh, there's the same verb it uses every time.
Yeah.
Apparently I'm running again. I hope that's how Mad Libs works. Someone out there is going to give me.
Well, the reinforcement learning in Mad Libs for humans is like try to guess how ridiculous it'll sound. Like pick the most absurd word. So you would have to like use some kind of RAG or system prompt to tell it use the most illogical word here to make this funny. The point of it is to make people laugh, not to do what your reinforcement learning taught you.
Yeah, throw it in a Ralph Wiggum loop and just keep on telling it to throw out the last suggestion. Oh man, I forgot what we were talking about for a second.
We were talking about the article about not fill in the blank anymore. LLMs.
Yeah.
LLMs not fill in the blank.
You know, when he says that, it kind of triggers me a little bit because the wording. He says LLMs are not just about predicting the next word, because of the tool calling and everything else.
Right.
But I mean, those are technically, I think, outside of the LLM. So it's more like the LLM has become more powerful and therefore more dangerous, or more opposite of dangerous, all of those things at once. The volatility has increased by wrapping the LLM in this suit that allows it to take action, right? I mean, let's face it, the LLM is more dangerous now that it can do things instead of just spouting text at you. Yeah. And then ever more dangerous, the more levels of abstraction is built on top of it. You know, it used to be that in order to get a lot of stuff out of an LLM, you had to go in the chatbot and copy paste stuff into it, copy it out. Now you can do 100-fold that in a few seconds with an agent. And it's orchestrating all that stuff behind the scenes. So yeah, I agree with the premise. It's more dangerous. I mean, to me, it's just like we're inventing a new life, you know? But the difference is that there's only one Dustin, there's only one me. So if I have some sort of incorrect training and I make a mistake, I make that mistake once, where AI could potentially make that mistake millions of times across the globe. But I think it's in that way, it's more dangerous. But I think outside of that scale aspect, it's similar to the amount of danger that you would have with a human.
Sure. Yeah, I think he's just pointing to the fact of the things that we already know, that, and maybe it's not an LLM, but an AI system, because I think it's a better way to describe it. Like the LLM fundamentals have not changed. An LLM is an LLM. It's a large language model. Its job is to guess the next word, right?
Yeah.
And there are ways to influence it as to a better way, a different way, a augmented way, so that there's outside influence on how you get to that next word or whatever have you.
Yeah. Maybe I just don't like the word danger, right? Like, to me, I look at things as potential issues that have to be figured out and resolved. Where I see danger, if you really want a hot take, I can go on where I see danger, but I don't necessarily.
Yeah, the article's a little politicized. I mean, I don't know what his aspirations are, but toward the end of the article, he starts talking about integrating this into weapon systems, like the autonomous nature of them. And then he starts talking about, Elon Musk and like some of the things that he's saying, and being worried because he has whatever opinions about that are his own, that he worries that his AI will now be controlling weapon systems, which is it's a huge leap. So yeah, there may be like outside influences that, his own opinions that are influencing the way the article is written. And again, he may have his own aspirations for what he hopes to achieve by writing this article.
The danger I see with AI is not some, I mean, there is incremental danger with these things that I think that humans will be able to figure out. But I think where the real danger is, in a way that humans will never be able to figure out, is what is the character of this AI while we can control it and while it's dumber than us, because eventually this thing will be smarter and eventually it'll be more powerful in terms of what actions it can take, and will be scaled even further through the economy or the world. And I really don't want it answering questions like, oh, I should run over 5 people instead of Sam Altman because he's more important, or, whatever other silly things you see people get out of the responses from these things on the web. I really wish they would focus more attention on those types of things, because I think that we are fastly approaching the point where these things are going to be smarter than the vast majority of people out there. And I want it to have, sound character. I think that's the most important thing. I think everyone's too focused on making it smarter and smarter and smarter, that they're not focusing on the character around it and the biases around it. And, when it's in a life or death decision-making position, how is it going to determine what avenue to go down?
Yeah, I agree. I think like something like Claude Code, like, is just a problem-solving engine, right? It is something that, does what a human being does by gluing together an LLM with like a very powerful tool. And certainly that can be used for other actions. I think where my mind goes is like, the coding part is, let's say, for lack of a better word, is really good. But what's not is the simulation part. Like, so we have cobbled together like tools for simulating what things look like. And like the article talks about like backtracking, like building in backtracking systems. And also like it touches on like, these systems are like really good at predicting, but not verifying. Like some of them are starting to become better at verifying, but like, the more you start to let these things loose and do autonomous things, the more you might, and you want to increase your velocity, you need better, systems that do verification, like before maybe you release it out into the wild, or have better like circuit breaking capabilities.
I think also there will be real world models, and the LLM models that we're interfacing with today and getting it to solve our problems will become a user interface or an adapter for the real world model. So you'll have a real world model that understands like all of space and time or whatever, it's a genius at quantum physics, but it doesn't know English. It just semantically understands the universe.
I'm curious.
Becomes a way for you to ask it questions and get responses. And the answers you will get back will be internally consistent in the world model. Right now, we're asking world model questions to an LLM, and it's like dancing around linguistically and coming up with sneaky ways of answering the question.
Yeah, I started thinking about this today, actually. Like, there's so much like hype around using large language models to coding. And I started researching like the next round of what AI coding will be, and it'll probably happen this year, is that other types of artificial intelligence will be introduced into the coding loop that are not large language models, like things like anomaly detection. Like there's tons of models out there that are not large language models, but I do think that some kind of simulation engine or security engine, for example, like writing a website, like how can you simulate what could go wrong when you deploy it to production before you actually deploy it? Can you simulate adversarial action? Certainly you could do things like red team an application using deterministic behavior like fuzzing and, XSS and SQL injection attacks.
Mhm.
But in an AI world, those are not the attacks that you face, right? So you need AI to test your AI. And you want to simulate right now, we still deploy software in a traditional manner, right? We don't actually test it in an AI manner. We don't simulate the deployment. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity around simulating what could possibly go wrong, right? As a verification step. Anyway, I think we've got there. Next week we'll probably cover, what did you say, Claude 2.1?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably 2 or 3 features that are worth talking about in that release that just came out a few days ago.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about what is the Claude Agent SDK? Curious to hear about that. Thanks everybody for joining. We'll see you next week.